Hi, great. Thank you. My name is Stacey DeBenedictis. I'm the Marketing Director at Global Food Safety Resource, and I'd like to give a warm welcome to everyone on today's webinar. Global Food Safety Resource is delighted to sponsor today's SQF webinar because it's a topic that's critically important for food businesses. Building a food safety culture definitely isn't something that happens overnight. I think that's something that all of us on this call can attest to. It takes time and effort, but the rewards can be outstanding and can definitely help mitigate your overall business risk. GFSR is an online business-to-business resource that food companies can utilize to develop your food safety culture. GFSR promotes best practices in food safety across all sectors of the food industry from farm to fork. You'll see on your screen right now that we have a screenshot of our website, and you'll see a red box that just came up. This highlights the 5 main areas that GFSR covers when it comes to food safety. The first section gives a thorough overview of food safety topics and ideas. Industry standards is next on the list and is information on topics such as GFSI standards, HACCP, sanitation, hygiene, pest control, packaging, labeling, all kinds of great information in there. Regulatory compliance deals with FSMA, the Safe Foods for Canadians Act, and other regulatory standards by region. Risk management has information such as food recalls, traceability, and food security. And our food science section deals with pathogenic organisms, foodborne pathogens, food laboratories, and more. GFSR's content is available in 60 languages, and we're on a responsive mobile platform. Our website receives on average more than 40,000 page views per month from food safety professionals in more than 180 countries who are seeking reliable food safety information. I'd also like to introduce you to GFSR's presence on social media. Tina Brillinger, our President and CEO, is among the top 1% of LinkedIn influencers. You can follow her on LinkedIn, or you can also join either our LinkedIn group or our company page. You can follow that. And we also have a presence on Twitter. Tina has an account, and you can follow her at GFSR Center. Back to the website, I'd like to draw your attention to GFSR's complimentary membership. It's highlighted in the yellow star that's on the top of your screen. By signing up to become a member, you'll receive our e-newsletter. It comes out once a month and is chock full of food safety articles and information. In addition, you can also customize your member profile to receive industry-leading white papers, webinar trainings, and other free food safety resources. So if you click on that membership tab, you can sign up and you can receive all of those free materials. All of this great information would not be possible without the support of our advertisers. If you offer a product or service to food businesses, consider advertising with GFSR to align your company with our reputation for providing practical and reliable insights to food safety. This banner ad, which is currently occupied by SQF on our homepage, is just one of the many advertising opportunities that we can offer your organization. All right, with that, let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to Ron Vail, who's the president of ACET Global Consulting. He has over 35 years of experience in the food industry, where he's held positions in quality, manufacturing, and procurement. Ron graduated from Colorado State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Microbiology and began his food career with AIB as a field inspector. His career progressed through the food industry, where he held positions with various international food companies as quality assurance manager, plant sanitarian, manager of food safety programs, and vice president of supply chain. His most recent experience has been as senior director of AIBI certification body, and he's also an SQF auditor. Ron's experience has included worldwide consulting, education and training for development and implementation of HACCP, as well as food safety prerequisite programs and food safety schemes for BRC, SQF, and FSSSC 2000. So with that, I'll turn things over to Ron, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Stacy, and I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, SQF, for providing this opportunity to speak with you. And hopefully that by the end of this conversation that there will be some ideas that will be motivating for you, that will also be somewhat provocative, and you can go back to your facility and kind of ask yourself some questions, look in the mirror, and ask some questions about what kind of food safety culture do we have, because we all know that the food safety side of things is extremely important today. One of the things that we also know is that the food safety culture within a facility is one of the driving forces for what we do. Management and the people in the plant and management and everybody, and all the employees. When you go in the plant, they all have some degree of performance. They have some degree of behavior, and it all comes back to the culture within the plant. And take that back another step. It comes within the mindset of the management style in the plant and what transcends throughout the entire organization. So we're going to be talking about the mindset in the facility that corresponds to the food safety culture. We'll also talk about what's changed in the last couple decades that relate to culture and how that transcends to actual events that can affect a facility. We'll talk about why this change has occurred to some degree, and then again what needs to change, and then what the future is going to hold, and kind of what to expect. Because when you stand back away from the events of the world, and not only from the food safety events, but when you look at how the retailers are looking at food safety, how the plants are reacting to food safety in some degree, things are changing for us, and we have to adapt. And so we'll talk a little bit about that aspect of it. But the mindset, it really all starts about the mindset. It is the driving force behind what happens in a facility, how things happen in the facility, how the facility approaches a lot of things, including the food safety side of their business. In many respects, the mindset is conscious. The management style and the operations paradigms and style is a conscious, deliberate design. But in some respects, it's unconscious. And from the unconscious side of things, it's because it's the way we've done things. Certain facilities have done things for decades, and it becomes tribal knowledge. It just becomes a natural way of doing business. But in all respects, though, the mindset that comes from the top management on down is really the basis of how operations will be performed and will be conducted. And so what I'm going to ask you is look at your facility as we go through this entire presentation. Hopefully, that you will look at your facility in the mirror and ask some of these questions to say, what is our food safety culture? How do we do things? Why do we do things? Is it the best? And can it get better? Because eventually, the food safety culture and the way that the mindset is in the facility will transcend to having safe product, good quality product, meeting customer expectations, regulatory requirements, or it will be the other way. That because of the culture in the facility, you may very well be at risk just because of the way that things are done. So my question to you is a good food safety culture. And we'll talk about what that means a little bit as we get down there. Is it an operational priority? And that's the question I'd like to ask. Is this an operational priority, or do you do it by convenience? Now, what is food safety? Well, we talk about, all kinds of different programs we have in the facility. But I'd like to throw this idea out to you, that what is food safety? It is actually two words. And think about this. Food safety is actually human safety. But what it is, it's from the inside as opposed to the outside. Whatever happens relative to food safety and the food itself that we consume creates certain situations that can be correlated to the human safety that we always talk about is slips and falls and pinch points and all these other kinds of things in a facility, but we call that, what we always read to human safety, and it gets a high priority in your company. But the human safety side of things is also food safety. So we say, well, what's the corresponding? Well, we can have chemical burns to the outside of the body, but you know what? We can have chemical resulting from chemical problems from consumption of hazardous chemicals that have gotten into the food or the ingredients from multiple sources. We also, from the human safety side, we always talk about cuts and abrasions. Well, if we consume food that has glass or metal or brittle plastic in it, we can have GI trauma. Okay, and so that is just as important, and in fact, in some respects, it's more important than having a cut and abrasion on the outside, because once it happens on the inside, it's hard to get to. It's hard to repair. Another one is skin infections. Well, we can get skin infections on the outside of the body, but what happens when we get food poisoning on the inside of the body? So there are several correlations to the human safety issues that we have in the what we call on the food safety side of things as well. Okay, so there is a direct correlation. Now, the food safety culture in your facility, how is it defined? How do you define food safety culture in your plant? And I'm going to ask you this question to look in the mirror. Is food safety defined by crisis management, or is it defined by proactive management? And what I really mean about that one is, do you look at food safety from a preventative, predictive, proactive mode, or does food safety become a high priority in your company after a crisis occurs? Or does it occur just prior to an audit or an inspection or publication of new regulatory requirements like the FSMA regulation coming out? Is the culture in your facility to be ahead of the game, or are you behind it? Regardless of what it is, food safety incidents that occur in a plant can be accidental, or it can actually be a result of the actual culture within the facility. And again, when I talk about culture, I'm talking about the mindset, the manner in which food safety is looked at, how it's defined, how you develop programs, you implement them, you maintain them on an ongoing basis. And here are some incidents that we all know about. These are all well known. And when you look at the root causes of these incidents, in almost all respects, the culture created these situations. And in many respects, they were intentional. And sometimes it was unconscious, but, it was just the way we do business. But in the end, at the end of the day, it created a food safety incident that had enormous impact to the entire world. Now, a couple of these, like the cantaloupe and the egg situation, was somewhat regional, but the reason that they had global impact is because of our communication processes. It went global. Everybody in the world talks about these particular issues when they talk about food safety. So my question to you, do you have one of these situations brewing in your facility because of culture, because of the way the facility is managed towards food safety? Do we do it by crisis? Do we do it predictive? Do we do it as a proactive manner? Or are we just sitting here maintaining status quo and hoping that one of these type of situations don't happen to you? But whatever happens and whenever it happens, with any food safety incident, it's going to erode your customer confidence. And we know that, and in the end, after we do the analysis and the investigation, and we talk to customers when we go in the field, it erodes customers' perception of the food business. So why, after decades and decades and decades of all this science, this technology, all this training, all the money we spend for food safety, do we have these incidents? Why do they occur? Well, it gets down to the mindset of how the company is being managed from the top down. And eventually people say, well, there's been no improvement. There's a perception of no improvement. Now, these type of food safety incidents affect a very, very small percentage of companies. They're a small percentage in the big picture of all of the hundreds of thousands of manufacturing facilities around the world. But the problem with that is every one of those incidents are a cousin to us. Everybody that does things right somehow has a negative influence because you're in the food business. There's always this question about the perception of the value of the product, the safety of the product. And one of the questions that gets asked all the time is why? We've had inspections for decades. We've had audits for decades. But nothing seems to be changing in the eyes of the consumer whenever one of these food safety incidents occurs. So it's incumbent upon us to take the steps ahead of the game so that we're not subject to these type of situations. And because audits have happened for decades and GMP inspections have happened for decades, all kinds of process control audits, all these trainings, we are still experiencing these situations. And again, it's a small percentage, very, very small percentage of those companies that are doing things right. And to all of you that have a good food safety culture, you're doing your things right. Congratulations and thank you, because we're all your customers. But what has to change across the board so that more of the manufacturing world gets online with these current food safety management techniques and processes so that these food safety incidents are eliminated, not just minimized, but eliminated. And that should be the target. That should be the target in the facility and in the management, from the management's mentality, is we want to eliminate these type of incidents that create injury and harm, and in many respects, loss of the entire business. But it really all starts with the food safety mentality at the management level, because that transcends down into the organization of your facility. And it starts really, these are three components, and there may be more in here, but we have a corporate component, we have a plant component, and then we have the individual. And in many respects, a lot of companies don't have a corporate entity, but those that do, you can see in many respects a difference in the food safety mentality between corporate staff, the plant, and the individuals. I mean, those of us that go into facilities for audits and inspections, that we go in for training, we can see the differences if there are these three, or if there's just one. We can go in and we can pick out a good food safety culture just by driving in the parking lot. And those of us that have the luxury of dealing with large corporations that have a culture that have a corporate component. We can see in many respects similarities between the corporate food safety culture to the plant to the individual, but we can also see disconnects all along the way. When we sit back and look at the food safety cultures that work well, is that when you stand back away from the detail, what is evident, this is my opinion, okay, what is evident is that you can see the manner in which food safety is implemented and it's maintained, that it is predictive instead of reactive. So what has to change in one aspect is through the world is that the mentality has to get into a predictive mode. We have to get out of this reactive mode by which we think, well, this situation is not going to happen to us, or these regulations are not pertinent to us, or we have never had this happen before. Well, when you're in that mentality, I guarantee you that somewhere in your facility or in your business, you have a food safety incident brewing. You just haven't realized it yet. And in many respects, it will happen because we're in the food business. There are some things we have control over, and there are some things we don't have control over. But the point is, if we're not being predictive, eventually these food safety incidents are going to rear their head. And hopefully, facilities will have the necessary programs developed and implemented and maintained in your facility to catch these type of situations before it gets to the consumer. If it gets to the consumer, then we all know about it. But one of the things that have to change, we've got to get out of this reactive mode in all aspects and get into a predictive mode. And there's lots of information that we have in our facility that we can use to become predictive and not always be behind the eight ball in a reactive mode. So I ask you, all of you, and there's over 200 of you on this, what is the food safety culture in your facility? Is it a positive culture or is it a negative culture? And what I mean by negative is that there are situations where you're lucky not to have a food safety incident that gets out into the public because you have the steps in place in your facility. Well, when you're doing that, you're always playing catch-up. And those of us that don't work in your facility, who are auditors and inspectors and trainers and consultants, when we come into your facility, we know a positive or a negative food safety culture when we see it. You can't always describe it. It's kind of like grabbing fog. You can't grab onto it, but you know it when you see it, and you know it when you feel it. But those of you that are in your facility, you know it when you experience it. As soon as you drive into your company, into your parking lot, you can tell what kind of food safety culture you have in your company. And I will go on record as saying is that when you drive into your parking lot, you can transcend the food safety culture from the lot into your facility, and it can come from and it can transcend over to corporate, to the plant level, and even to individuals. Those of us that visit your facilities, we know that when we walk in your parking lot, that is the first indicator of what we're going to see when we get in that facility. But the thing is and every facility is going to be a little bit different. But we know when we're going to have a positive culture, or we know where we think we might have a negative culture And these are some of the indicators. So this is what I'm asking you. To look at your facility when you drive into your lot the next day, or maybe you did today. What does your parking lot look like? Are there hairnets laying around? Are there earplugs? Are there cigarette butts laying around on the ground right beside the trash can? Are there food wrappers? The lunchroom. Now let's go into the facility. Let's go from the park and let's go into the lunchroom. What does your lunchroom look like? Is it neat and tidy for the operation? Again, we're not expecting you to have a surgery room, but is it neat and tidy for the operation, or is it a mess? Are there newspapers laying on the table? Are there food wrappers and empty food containers on the tables, on the counters? Are there piled up dishes in the sink? Is the floor clean? Are the counters and the sinks clean? Okay, I would almost bet that if you go into a parking lot and you see those type of situations in a parking lot, you'll find them the very same in the lunchroom, because the mentality of the plant and the individuals is the same. So out of the lunchroom, go into the restrooms. What do we see there? See dirty clothes laying around, everything stacked on top of lockers. You know, and we see paper towels on the floors. We see writing on the cubicles, on the cubicle wall. That doesn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen just before the auditor, the inspector, or the trainer arrived at your facility. It's been there. It's been recognized. It's been seen. But nothing gets done. Then we go into your facility. We go into storage. Look at storage practices. How are the raw materials, the packaging, being stored? How about distressed product, damaged bags? How many of those do you see? What do you see of spilled residue on pallets, on the pallet rack stringers, in the corners, up against the floor wall junctions, underneath the dock levelers? You know, things such as this. Again, talk to the mentality of product safety. And then temporary repairs. Temporary repairs is also an indicator of the mentality. If you see a lot of temporary repairs, what does this say about the approach to permanent fixing, to a PM program? And we all have these programs in our facility that temporary repairs are identified. Sometimes they're dated, they're logged, and they have to have a work order with a timeline against it and a responsibility. But how many times do we go into facilities and we see that sometimes the timeline, if it is documented, the timeline is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks tardy, and and management knows about it, but nothing gets done. That is mentality, and these are some indicators about the plant environment that gets to the mentality. And it all comes down to leadership. And again, leadership is management. And I ask you to look in your facility. Is your leadership a facilitation type, or is it a dictation type? I'll go out and I'll say that if your management style in your facility is a facilitation type, everybody has ownership, because they're giving. Management is giving the employees the opportunity to identify issues and take action. Go talk to somebody. Write up a work order. Write up an incident report. And get things fixed. There is that freedom of latitude. But when it is in a dictation type situation, people only do what they're told to do, because they don't want to go into somebody else's turf, or they don't want to go into somebody else's area and start causing trouble. And in fact, management many times facilitates that. Stay in your area. I've got other people in other areas to take care of theirs. Stay in your area. Well, automatically you have an antagonistic type environment. So think about your operations. Do you have the latitude of going in to any time you see it when you're transiting your operation and you see a food safety issue? It doesn't have to be significant. It can just be small. Do you have the latitude and the freedom and the comfort to go to somebody and say, you know, I identified something, let's get it fixed? Is in your facility, do you have structured discipline? Is it predictable? Can you safely say that when you as an employee see something that you are disciplined to identify it, to follow it through, and it will get done? Or is it something that is, you know, we'll get to it when we have the time? Do you have the discipline that is predictable and you know what's going to happen? Do you have SOPs for everything that you do? Or is it done by tribal knowledge, tribal experience? Now what's changing in the world is that exact aspect right here. For decades, companies have existed on tribal knowledge, and they've passed processes and practices on down to the next person. The training has been OJT, on-the-job training, where new employees are assigned to senior employees, and they do as the senior employee does. Well, that may be right, but it also may not be the most optimum. So what are we getting into? So what is the new environment of food safety programs bringing to the party? They're bringing SOPs. Like SQF, almost in every single clause, it says methods and responsibilities to do something shall be documented and implemented. And almost every program, you've got to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to make it up. You just write down what you're doing and compare it to the requirements, and then make adjustments if you need to. But that's one of the big changes that's happening in the food industry now. And I remember going back to the late 70s when I first started in food safety as a field inspector. Many times, didn't have SOPs. We just evaluated what we saw today and what was being done today. We didn't go back in time and look at, is what we see today done yesterday? And will it be done tomorrow? And if you have 3 people responsible, will they all do it the same way? That's one of the changes that's come that is in the business right now, is in the industry, and it's been there for at least a decade. Now, what do we see as also indicators of culture in your facility is plant commitment. Now, what I left out of there was somebody said, well, what about management commitment? Well, management commitment I take as part of plant commitment because it involves management and the supervisor level and the hourly employee level and the office. But it is a plant commitment that's important. And when we go into facilities, we evaluate management's commitment of what they say they do and what they say they want to see happen. But we evaluate what actually happens on the floor. And in many respects, they're the same, but also they're different. Management will always, anytime when you talk to them, they'll put up this idea that we're doing these things right and everything, and then you go into the plant and you talk to the people and you get a different story. you see a different story. So again, I ask you, what kind of plant commitment throughout your facility, throughout your business, whether it's corporate, plant, do you have towards product safety? And I will tell you that one of the most significant indicators that I see around what is the food safety culture is your corrective action program. It is a significant indicator on how the plant will react to situations that are less than satisfactory. Because we are all in the food business, and we are all subject to things that we cannot control, surprises. And that's natural. But how do we deal with those is what's important, and that is the mentality. And then once we deal with them, what are we going to do in the future to make sure that same situation doesn't occur or is minimized? And then the third component is are we going to take that information, step back away from it, and just ask ourselves the question, is there other opportunities in this plant that have not happened that could happen if we are not predictive, if we are not preventative? And then if there are, you take action against it. You don't wait until the crisis happens. You do it ahead of the game. And that's what I talked about before. Do we manage food safety from a crisis mode versus a predictive mode? So the corrective action program and the way it's designed, the way it's implemented, and the way it's maintained is very important. But what we want to do eventually is we want to do the right thing for the right reason. And another aspect, at the right time. So do you do that? Or do you wait until a crisis happens, or a customer tells you to do something, or an auditor or an inspector comes in and finds the problems, and then you do something? Or you wait until an audit occurs and you have non-conformances, and then you are forced to do corrections, corrective action, and preventative action. How do you approach those situations? So what are some of the challenges for change I see coming in the future that will benefit the food safety culture, the food safety environment, and the food business as a whole? Is that there will be, and I'll tell you why there will be more teamwork in developing and implementing and maintaining food safety. There will be more teamwork instead of department head decision, plant manager decision, where nobody does anything until I'm told to do it. That mentality will not work in the future long term. What we will see is there will be more committees dealing with food safety challenges instead of a single decision. You will find more management of the food safety world and all of the aspects versus reacting to issues, because you have to be predictive. Retailers and consumers are not going to put up with companies that are continually causing them trouble and having complaints, because there's so many other companies in the world that are getting on the wagon, and they're improving their culture. They're improving their food safety systems and their management style, and they're getting better and better and better. That customers, retailers, or whatever the customer or the consumer is going to be, will have a choice. and they're going to go with the choice that's going to mitigate their risks. And they're going to find those companies, and they're going to go with them. And when this starts to happen, what ends up happening is the facility will change the management of the food safety programs into a system approach as opposed to a checklist, a task checklist, or just doing a procedure and stopping there. They're going to start looking at assessing their performance from a system perspective, because we know all of these food safety programs are connected. And you just don't do one program and forget about the other 3 or 4 that may be linked to it. So the people managing food safety and even management will start getting on board with that, because they have to understand the food safety program, the culture, and how things are being done in their facility. They have to understand. So they'll start beginning to understand the system approach to product safety. So here's some ideas for the future, and I'm asking you. These are the things that will be successful, is that there's going to be more teamwork. Do you have teams? Do you have committees where you work together to develop things? In the SQF program, is it the SQF practitioner that does everything? Is it a quality assurance manager or supervisor that does everything? Or do they just lead it? And and developing the SQF program, is it done as a teamwork, from a committee perspective, where you get multiple inputs from different people? And the reason it should be, and the reason is because every program is linked somehow across the system. Everybody will be impacted by it. And if you do that, you're going to have employee-directed work centers or employee-directed procedures where they are the ones that created procedures and processes and tasks for compliance, because they're the ones that have to do it. So why shouldn't they be the ones that develop those? It's not just the SQF practitioner or the QA manager, which it typically is. It's everybody involved. Is there acceptance of different approaches to addressing a situation? There isn't one fixes all. There can be different ways to arrive at the same destination. So is there acceptance to listen to them? And many times, the best approach is the person that doesn't have any experience in your area, because they ask the questions out of ignorance, and many times those questions lead you down the right path, because they say, I never thought about that. Because you think that those people that get involved so close to it, they think they already know the answer. In many respects, they do. But also, sometimes they don't. So is there acceptance in your operation for different approaches without repercussion? Is there a willingness to listen to opposing views? So the challenge, is form a series of teams combined of hourly supervision, department manager, and just ask the question, if we could start this company over again, or this operation, or this procedure all over again from the ground up, what would change? What would we do different? What would we do better? And how would we do it? And so I challenge you in your facility to ask those questions, because getting the answer to those questions, stepping back away from it, will give you the answer to your food safety culture and the mentality and the mindset. Do we have a positive one, or are we or we have a negative one? And then once you get that answer, then you know which direction to go. But again, that's the end of it. I thank you for your time. If you have questions, you can certainly ask them and write them in, and I'll answer what I can. If not, my email address is there. You can certainly give me a call. I'm more than happy to help out.
Hey, Ron, this is Leslie with SQFI. I haven't seen any specific questions come in, but I'll stay on the line for another minute or so just to see in case, people are typing or thinking through things. Oh, wait, never mind. Someone just come up. Okay, no questions, but some compliments. I'll make sure to send it over.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't see any either. John, thank you for the compliment. So.
Okay, someone just asked, can you clarify discipline?
Discipline. What I mean by discipline is, I don't mean punitive discipline. What I mean is, how do you function in the facility? When you come into the facility, do you know what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, for the reason you're going to do it? Do you understand why you're going to do it? And the discipline is that if you have three shifts performing the same task, do they do it the same way? Do they follow procedures? As well as, is there a disciplined approach to developing and implementing a food safety program, such as, the very first thing that you got to write procedures. The next thing is, when you do that, you got to train the people. The next thing you do that, you're going to have performance reports that they're going to go out and fill out. The next step is there's going to be verification of these reports. Okay? So what I'm saying is, you develop a disciplined approach to implementing programs so that when people come in, they know exactly the way things are going to happen. They know, and everybody on different shifts knows what it's going to happen. You can ask 3 different people. Say, what is the sequence of events that we have that will develop a procedure and implement it and maintain it? And everyone will say, well, first thing we're going to do is write a procedure with a team. The team's going to be multidisciplinary. The next time is we're going to train the people who have to do the job. We're going to have a training record. And then we're going to have a performance report that they know how to fill out. They know what to look for. And then we're going to have a verification function. The person doing the verification who didn't do the monitoring knows exactly what to look for. And we have a training program around that. That's what I mean by discipline. It's a disciplined approach, a structure that is successful.
Okay, Ron, as you were giving your answer, we did get a couple other questions come through, so I'm just messaging them to you, and then I guess you can just start down that list.
Okay, let's see where. Oh boy. Let me go up here. Let me go up here to the top here. Okay. There was one question. It says, what is the very first thing you do to evaluate when you walk into a facility as a consultant? Well, as a consultant, you're going in sometimes for a very specific reason, and sometimes you're going in to just say, well, let's take a look around, and the company many times has a very specific reason what you're going in for, so you go in with a predetermined mindset. But what I always do is I go in with an open mind to say, well, this is what the company, first of all, this is what the company brought me in to do. However, I know from a lot of experience that that's not the only thing that we're gonna end up getting involved with, because there's always tangents that affect what you came in there to do as a primary reason. And so what I do is I go in and I start looking for other indicators that may assist me in my job. And many times those indicators are, and again, I get back to what I said before, the parking lot. When I go into an assignment, I'm going to look at the parking lot. I'm going to go in the reception area. What kind of a reception do you get? And then who comes to meet you? What's the next step that happens? That gives me an idea on structure, on discipline, on commitment, on focus, and then what the physical facility looks like. Because that transcends to commitment, to mentality. And it's important that I, as a consultant, knows what happens about the mentality of an organization, because we're a guest. As a consultant, you're a guest in a manufacturing site. And they're always going to put on the best show right up front. But does that transcend what actually happens in the plant? So I always look at what I see as far as when I first enter the plant to give me an idea. Am I really going to get what I've been told and what I see? Okay. There's another question here. Will the auditor be looking for these types of things? How does the auditor look and evaluate management commitment? Well, I would say an auditor should look at those kinds of things. And we talk about the part, because that's actually part of the GMP modules inspection criteria. Yes, they should be looking at those. Evaluating management commitment. This is probably one of the areas of most improvement opportunity. And those of us that are inspectors and auditors out there, I ask you this question. When you go in for a visit or a consultant, do you sit down with the plant manager or the director of operations by themselves when no one else is around, and you go through the question and answer process about, plant manager, what do you consider to be commitment? How do you think about that? What do you think your role is? And then talk about that. And then say, what have you done in the last 6 months to participate that demonstrates, both actively and passively, management commitment towards food safety? What have you done? Now, you've already walked through the parking lot. You've walked through the reception. You've been met. Many times you go into the lunchroom, get a cup of coffee. If you're vigilant and you're observant, those observations can be held for when you talk to the plant manager and see if they're telling you if they're telling you a story that connects to what happens when you just walk in that plant. So you can have you can have that discussion with plant manager, and I see in many respects that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So that's how it can be. That's how one way can evaluate management commitment. What kinds of questions should the auditor ask to measure management commitment to see if it's present? Well, again, I kind of answered that one to some degree, very, very briefly. But, do you understand what your role is? And in the SQF world, there's probably 10 or 15 different things that management has to understand. They have to understand what they are, what their role is, how do they execute what their responsibility is. And not only execute, but how do you follow up? And execute sometimes is, well, I'll defer, I will delegate this task to my supervisor. That's not what we're getting at. What we're getting at is, what do you do, and why do you do it? And then how do you follow up? Because management commitment is not just a one and you're done kind of situation. You've got to be involved to demonstrate that day in and day out. So another question is, that I always ask my friends, is what do you do day in, day out? Sometimes I ask the question, what does your daily routine look like or weekly routine look like that you believe demonstrates an active or a passive function toward food safety that people see, not behind your office door, but what do you do in the plant? Tell me what that is. Explain what that is. So that is something that can be asked. And that tells you if you know that it's there. Let's see here. Oh, please give example of how best we change the culture when many employees have been with the company for 10-plus years or are used to doing the other thing. Well, the best way you start changing is just get started. The person that wrote that, you just get started. And first of all, I would suggest that you identify, and if you want to use the content of this presentation, identify the indicators that correlate to a less than satisfactory mentality. And that is the parking lot, the lunchroom, the restrooms, trash on the floor, overflowing garbage cans where people are walking right by it, piles of floor sweepings where forklifts drive through it or people step on it, or they're pushed up against the wall instead of put in the garbage can, or documents, the wrong version of documents out there and they're being verified. Those kind of things are indicators that people are just going through the motions. They're just doing the task because that's what they're supposed to do. Start with those indicators and then say, this has to change. And you don't get out and challenge people about your mindset's not right or you don't have your mind in the right spot. That's not what you do. You say, look, these things have to be reversed. And the fix is just a mirror image of the issue. And start the process. And then ask them, how can this change? What can we do in your work zone, your work center, to get these things changed? What are your suggestions? Because change is not an option. Getting better is not an option. We have to do it. Or you're going to, sooner or later, that food safety incident that's brewing in your facility is going to rear its ugly head. And then you're going to be in crisis management mode. And that's what you want to prevent. I never suggest using the scare factor. That has been used for decades and it doesn't work. Use the team approach. Ask people, look, if you're going to go to this area, if you're going to walk in this area, if you're going to sweep up this pile, why not just take an extra couple seconds to put it in the garbage can? You're there already. If you're going to fill out a document, why leave it blank? Or why put check marks or squiggly marks? You're already there. You're taking the time. Why don't we just do it right? Put down the measurement. Put down the number. And do it right. And look at the version control. Do we have the right version out there? So get the people involved in the solutions. And then when it happens, reward them. You don't have to give them a jacket. You don't have to give them show tickets or meal tickets. You just say thank you. And then you use that to make changes in the rest of your organization. Question, how do you get senior management buy-in? We see evidence in the recent FDA 483 inspection report that makes food safety experts truly question senior management commitment. Is it going to take a threat or jail time under FSMA? You know, in some respects it will, because there are some managers that just don't get it, and they're the ones that operate through crisis management. You go into these facilities and it looks like a fire drill. Those managers are the ones that's going to have to learn through crisis. And it's just the way it is. But as time goes on, I personally believe that those operations become fewer and fewer and fewer because they will not survive. You cannot survive long-term in this food business, in the global food business now, in a crisis management mode. You just will not survive long-term. So I think that as time goes on, management will learn from the experiences of those incidents that I relayed later, They will learn from that. But there are some that are going to, but there are some, and many more, are taking the proactive approach and saying, you know what, these indicators are here in my operation, and I am going to be predictive and get ahead of the game. But will there be those? Yes, there will be. That's just the way it is. Here's one. When you find that food safety culture is not really understood in a plant or the company, only reactive, not predictive, with no appropriate corrective action management, the auditee disagrees. Well, that's fine. I mean, the auditee can disagree, but the point is that if you're an auditor, you don't want to get into a debate. You don't want to get into an argument. And if you base your opinion on fact, then you're always going to be, shall I say, more in the right. But management commitment, and sometimes is very empirical. You can actually measure what they do. But the other part of it is the thing that they do that you don't have a measurement against. You can't see. And that's where the conversation comes in. And as well as that's where the plant condition comes in. You can tell when the plant manager tells you that they are committed to food safety and they propagate these good things, and you go out in the plant and you see the place is tidy, storage practices are good, tools are hanging where they need to be, there's no garbage on the floor, and the restrooms and lunchrooms and parking lots clean and manicured, and the plant manager also, or the director of operations, also talks that story. Now there is a one-for-one correlation. You can see that. But you don't want to get into a debate or an argument about it. Base it on fact. How do I get a member on my team to be a team player or follow the SOPs and not do it their way? Well, this is, and I've always said this, that probably the best tactic that you can use if you are in the SQS system is your internal audit process. That internal audit component is one of the most important tools you have in your toolbox of food safety programs, because that internal audit will identify those type of situations when people are not following it and not following the SOP. Because the reason it's one of the most important aspects is because when you do an internal audit, even though it only has to be done once a year, it doesn't say it can't be done every week, okay? I've always suggested use that internal audit to document that particular situation when somebody's not following an SOP. And then use the SQF system that says internal audits and corrective action shall be reported to the management team in the management review. At the next management review, report it. And what you're doing is you're following the SQF protocol. Blame SQF for it. I think it's great. You're just following protocol. And you know what? And once you assign a timeline to that corrective action, you follow that timeline. You follow it up with verification that correction or corrective action is working. And you report that back up to management review. Eventually, the person will get the idea, as well as management now is part of the solution, because they will be required to go back and make sure things happen. They are ultimately responsible. So now you've involved them, and they cannot absolve themselves from responsibility because of rank. Now they're part of it. So use that internal audit program for your corrective actions and your corrective action program to identify those situations. What is the most effective way to show the management that they believe they are part of a team, but in fact are dictatorial? Okay, you know what? That is an outstanding question. Outstanding question. This is how you create, as just a suggestion, and I've used this very successfully, is you as an SQF practitioner or a team leader, you create an improvement project around a known, agreed upon issue, and the plant manager is a team member of which you are the team leader. That plant manager is assigned tasks equal to other people in the team. They don't lead it. They're a team member, not a leader. And see where that goes for you in many respects. And then when you have your team meetings, don't let the plant manager take over the team meeting. You set the rules of engagement up right up front. You are the leader. And you make the decisions on how things are progressing and how tasks are being done. But try that. See if that works. Another question, how do I get a member of my team to be a team player? Okay, so we've already talked about that. Well, from my list of questions, that seems to be the kind of the last one. Do you have any else? Any other ones?
Hey, Ron, I think I sent all of the ones that came in to you, so it sounds like we went through them. But I guess if anyone else has something that was addressed, there's your email address right there. Oh, wait, of course, right when I say that. Here's one last one. Okay, let me just.
What was that? When management sees food safety as a cost, is that the one? Okay. When management, here's the question. When management sees food safety as a cost and they just want to meet the minimum, how to explain to them the point? That I was wondering if that question was going to come up because traditionally, and this is one of the traditional things that I see changing in the future, is that management approaches quality as a cost center and not a profit center. And that is where you, as a quality manager or an SQF practitioner, have the opportunity of taking each of your SQF programs and making a performance indicator out of them. What you do is, and not all the programs will work that way, but there are many of them that will. You create a performance indicator, and what you do is you equate the performance, the adequate or the proper performance of that task, the cost of doing it. And you can get your finance accountant to help you with that. What's the cost of doing it right, okay, as a denominator of the revenue generated from the product going through that point. And this is what I'm getting at, is that many times everything that happens in the 6 sides of your building, the floor, walls, roof, and ceiling, is paid for by the revenue generated that goes out the door. Now, the challenge here is to demonstrate that the food safety tasks are designed by nature to ensure that production through those points in the process occur the first time right. That comes at a cost. We know that. But if it's done right, then the product gets sold the first time. You don't create rework, redo, recycle, or even customer rejections because that task was not done right. Every one of those, what I call the 4 R's, every one of those, if they have to be done again, erodes from the profit margin of doing it right the first time. So what you do is you quantify in the form of revenue dollars what the food safety program can do, if done right, to contribute to the profit margin as opposed to erode from it if it's not done right. And that gets into operational reliabilities and creating a performance indicator that's not based on frequency or not based on pass fail. It's based on revenue. That is what will get that's what will get the attention of management. When you can show all of these programs, and I'll throw this out to you, whoever you are that wrote this, write this down, that everything that fails in your plant creates one of the 4 R's. It creates either something that has to be reworked or maybe recycled, depending on how you define it. You're going to have redo, like cleaning that has to be redone, or maintenance work that has to be redone, or customer rejects at the end of it. Every one of those erodes from margin, profitable margin. So come up with these performance indicators that have a revenue component to it, and then start tracking the number of redos, the number of rejects based on revenue, and see, and then start tracking that. You put that in front of management, and you have a whole different angle at supporting food safety programs done right the first time. That contributes to revenue and margin. Okay.
All right, Ron. We haven't had any other questions come in, so I think this actually wraps us up, and it's great because we're right on time.
Well, good.
Thank you so much. This is an awesome presentation. And also, thank you so much to Stacy and GFSR for sponsoring. If anyone has any questions, obviously you can see on the screen there's Ron's email address. If you think of anything later, just shoot him an email. And for all of the participants that are still on the line, just a reminder that we did record Ron's presentation, and we expect to have this up on the SQFI website under the Events tab in about a week or two. So thank you so much, Ron, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Hope everyone enjoyed the presentation, and yeah, have a great day.
Yep, and thank you again, SQF, Leanne, or Christy, or Sarah, whoever's on the line. Thank you so much. I appreciated it, and it was fun for me. And again, I hope to see you down the supply chain trail somewhere. I'm sure I will.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, everyone. Have a good day.